How's it going, everyone? And welcome to this episode of the Fourth and Long podcast with your host, Alec Pecino, and co host, Bradley Walker. Tonight's show, we're going to go over more bold predictions, ranking our group of five conferences, freshmen to watch for week one, players to watch for week one, and head coaches that could get fired. And let's start with bold predictions. You go first, Bradley.
Well, I predicted on this show a couple of days ago that FSU would take a step back, and guess what happened today?
Sure enough.
Lost to Georgia Tech, 24-21. So, sorry all you FSU fans out there, but the writing is on the wall, and now that you lost to Georgia Tech, and I'm not saying you guys can't make the college football playoff, let's pump the brakes because I think a 2 or 3 loss team could still possibly make the postseason, but I think it really, honestly, is going to be a lot harder. I have a couple that I did as far as the bold predictions. I'm going to start with one, and again, I'm an SEC guy, so some of these are SEC related, or actually, all three of them are SEC related. Number one is Missouri secures a spot in the college football playoff. Now, people are going to think I'm crazy. Missouri has been a good football team since joining the SEC. They have been a thorn in the back of the Florida Gators since they came in. They have always been competitive. They beat us the last few years.
Last year when Drinkwitz was on the hot seat.
Correct. And they stick around. They're like Alec will tell you with the Big Ten with Iowa, they're just there. They're a mosquito that just you smack them and they just will not go away. So I predict, as a bold prediction, that Missouri will be one of the 12 playoff teams. I'll bring up one that Alec mentioned the other day, that the Tigers will beat Alabama on the road in Tuscaloosa. Now, that is the Iron Bowl at the end of the year. We all know that in the SEC country. And I think he's right. I think Auburn will beat Alabama at the end of the season on the road, which is not the easiest thing to do. But I think that'll happen. And then the only other one I have is it says the only SEC and Big Ten will have one of the at-large bids will be an SEC or Big Ten team, which I think there probably be more than one. And that may not be a bold prediction. That might be just a foregone conclusion in it when it's all said and done. But yeah, those are my 3 bold predictions for the year. Well, hopefully we'll see what happens. I was right about the FSU Seminoles, so I guess I started off good.
Okay, so let me get to my bold predictions. My 4th bold prediction is that Mississippi State, and I might get laughed at for this, I think Mississippi State's going to win more games this year than Oklahoma.
Could be. Good.
Even though Mississippi State's got a new head coach, in Jeff Levy, who I don't think has previously been a head coach. I know he's been an offensive coordinator at a bunch of different schools. So that's number 3. That's number 4. Number 3, 2 group of 5 schools will make the college football playoff. And it's going to be the combination of either the AAC, it's either going to be South Florida or Memphis. I can't see anyone else from the American besides Memphis or USF. Mountain West, either Boise State or Air Force. And Sunbelt, either Texas State, App State, or Coastal. Conference USA, Liberty. In Conference USA is an entire mess. Or actually, I'll throw Western Kentucky in there too.
Okay.
But those are the only 2 Conference USA schools I can see. MAC, Miami of Ohio, Toledo, and Ohio. Those are the only 3. And maybe an outside chance, maybe Bowling Green. But that's like bold. So that's number 3. Number 2. And again, this is another one I might get laughed at for. Colorado will finish third place in the Big 12 in their first season. Yes, and I've said this on the podcast before, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid of the Colorado hype. I know, and I did the same thing last year, and it burdened me big time. I'm willing to do it again. Very much willing to do it again. And then my last bold prediction is, as you can see by my shirt I'm wearing, it's Ohio State. Jack Sawyer, defensive lineman from Ohio State, wins the Heisman. Because a defensive player has not won the Heisman since, I believe it was Manti Te'o.
Could be. I
know
think
Woodson won it.
Desmond. The only one that I'm aware of is from Michigan, and I can't remember the guy's name.
Desmond Howard?
Yeah, I was gonna say I think he's the only one that I can remember.
Yeah, you're right. It was Desmond Howard. Next, we get to ranking Group of 5 conferences, and I will let you go first again.
All right, I'm going to start with 5, and then I'll go to 1. So I'll go in reverse order. I'm going to go with the American, and as you guys, I'm new to the show. This is only my second, and I appreciate Alec giving me the opportunity to come on here and talk on his show. I cover USF football. In fact, next Saturday at this time, it'll be close to kickoff. They kick off at 7:30 against Bethune-Cookman. I will be coming from the Rays game to drive to Tampa to cover the USF game, but I'll have the American. And the only you said something about, you said USF and Memphis. I would throw Tulane into that conversation as far as the American teams coming out. And they say UTSA, but UTSA is going to take a step back too. They lost a lot of their guys. But I wouldn't take Tulane out of that conversation either to be out of the American.
Can I interject for a second?
Sure.
So yes, I agree with you about Tulane, but the one thing that's really worries me about Tulane is they have a new quarterback and they have a new head coach.
Okay, then I agree with you. Then I will say USF and Memphis because I think they have most of the same players returning from last year. And Memphis, I think, won a bowl game last year.
They did.
Okay. Yeah. So
okay.
The American number 4 is the Big 12. And I know there's a lot of new teams that entered the conference and
you went beyond just Group of 5.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I did only Group of 5, but continue.
3 is the ACC. And then the Big 10 and the SEC are my top 2. So that's who I have.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I did all Group of 5. And number 5 for me is Conference USA. Like I mentioned a minute ago in bold predictions, Conference USA is a complete and utter dumpster fire. Other than Liberty and Western Kentucky, which Western Kentucky is only going to be there this year, and then they're going to the MAC, which, again, to me, I mean, that kind of makes sense because they're in that Kentucky. They're on the border they're in Kentucky, but they're not that far away from some of the Ohio schools. And then you got Kennesaw State, Jacksonville State, Sam Houston. And I went to school at a mid-major school for basketball at North Florida. And all 4 years I was there, we played Kennesaw State, Jacksonville State, Liberty. And Jacksonville State, to me, it didn't make sense for them to jump from a mid-major conference like the ASUN, because I understand they had a football program, but it didn't make sense for them to leap to another mid-major conference in Conference USA. But so that's number 5. Number 4 is the Mountain West. And I don't understand the teams in the Mountain West. I understand like San Diego State, San Jose State. Okay, that's California. Hawaii. Why are they in the Mountain West? That is not even, they're not even West Coast. They're 10 and a half hours away flying, but they do play good football in the Mountain West. Don't get me wrong, but it's the alignment of the conference just doesn't make sense. Number 3 is the Sun Belt. And I talked about it a second ago, why I like the Sun Belt. Texas State, App State, Coastal, and they call it the Fun Belt for a reason. Typically, you get games that are very high scoring, and there's not a lot of defense. Defense is not at a premium. And then number 2 for me is the MAC. Because you got it's always, MAC games are very competitive, and sometimes they're boring because all they do is it's a low scoring defensive struggle. And then number 1 for me is the American Athletic Conference, because of Memphis and South Florida. And yes, Tulane, even though they're going through, I'm not going to say a rebuild, I'm going to say more of a retool, since they lost Willie Fritz to Houston and had to bring in John Summerall. But that's my group of 5 conference rankings. Now we're going to get to freshmen to watch and for week 1, and I'll let you go again.
Well, but since we both have the kid from Nebraska, I'll let you take that one. The other 2 that I have down were cornerback Ellis Robinson, the 4th from Georgia. Again, it's not easy to make starting roster for Kirby Smart because he can go out now and recruit anybody he wants, any 5-star or 4-star guys. He can go, yeah, I'm going to go out here. We've won national championships. And despite all of the off-the-field shenanigans that we talked about on Thursday, he still is, and he now has become the new Nick Saban, okay? He has become the most hated coach in college football, not just the SEC. He has become the most hated coach in college football because Georgia's taken over the mountain in the SEC. Alabama had it for so many years. That was the team to beat. Well, now it's shifted, and now it's Georgia. And, of course, the SEC has broken up. It used to be the SEC East and West, and now that's gone. A lot of the conferences have broken down. But anyway, he is a defensive back, and he's a freshman. It says the Bulldogs bring back Dalen Everett as a one-time starting quarterback. Daniel Harris and Julian Humphrey contend for the second starting job. But the reason I picked him again is because it's so hard to be a starter as a freshman on a team that has so many guys that can fill in a role, like the next man up type thing. The other guy that I have is edge rusher Dylan Stewart from South Carolina. Again, there's another school in the SEC that not a lot of people talk about, but they're there and they win big games. They may not win 8 SEC championships and they may not be considered a playoff team, but they can beat a team and take them out of a playoff spot because they get underestimated so much. They're the Gamecocks. That's kind of the weirdest thing to say for a college football team. And a lot of people out there make fun of them because of the name that they have. But he's another one, just like it is, he's going to have, I believe, let's see, gifted development, something the Gamecocks have been here. Okay, so they were tied for the least amount of sacks in the conference last year with Vanderbilt. So to be tied with Vanderbilt in the SEC is not good. So those are my 2 because Alec and me had the same quarterback from Nebraska.
And then you took one of my other ones. I also had Dylan Stewart, but I'll talk about his teammate.
Okay.
Oh no, never mind. I had Raiola.
Okay.
So I'll get to my freshmen to watch for week 1.
Okay.
And the first one is Nico. I don't even know. I still don't know how to pronounce his last name. Iemiava Levea. That's the best shot I'm going to give it. And he started one game last year. He started the bowl game and just torched Iowa, but that's because Iowa was playing backups. And I think he's going to have a really big freshman season at Tennessee. Number 3 for me, and again, it's another Buckeye, but this kid's been getting talked about in fall camp, during the spring game, and he was even getting. I watched the Ohio State spring game, and he was getting double covered. That's because the DBs at Ohio State know how good he's going to be. It's Jeremiah Smith, and I think, and this is not a bold prediction, I just think it to me it's a spoiler. I think he's going to go for over 1,000 yards this year and have at least 7 or 8 touchdowns. My number 2 freshman to watch, and it's a position group. It is the Clemson freshman wide receivers. Clemson is with developing wide receivers. They're really good at developing receivers. DeAndre Hopkins, Hunter Renfrow, Adam Humphries. I think Adam Humphries went to Clemson.
No, I'm not sure.
I know Hopkins didn't. But the freshman receivers for Clemson. And number 1 is a combo. It's Lenore Sellers from South Carolina and Dylan Raiola from Nebraska. And Sellers did not play last year. I think he's going to be a lethal dual threat quarterback for South Carolina this year. And in Raiola, I think he's going to probably win freshman of the year in the Big Ten. If it's not Jeremiah Smith, it's going to be one of those two. And now we get to players to watch for week 1. And I'll let you go first again.
Okay, I have 3 that I picked, Alec. I'll start with 3 and go back to 1. I am not drinking the Kool-Aid in Colorado, but I got to put Travis Hunter up there because he has been a dual threat type of player since he since he went to Colorado, playing receiver and cornerback for Coach Prime. So he's definitely got to be a guy to watch in week 1. And back to Clemson, I'm curious to see how they do against Georgia because that's who they open up against. So that's going to be interesting to see how that freshman class opens up against the Georgia Bulldogs. Number 2 would be Ashton Gently out of Boise State. Here's another school, too, who doesn't get a lot of hype, but like Alec mentioned earlier in the show, they could be a playoff team this year because of the conference that they play in and they win. That program beat Oklahoma. We all remember the famous Statue of Liberty play. We all remember that upset that no one predicted. And again, they play on blue turf. So how cool is that? Like, that's cool. That's just cool on that. But Ashton Gently, they have 2 power conference games that they're going to be playing, Kansas and California. I'm not going to say they're going to win both those games, but I think they'll win at least one of those games this year because I think that would be huge for that program, hands down. And then I got to be an SEC bias. I got to go with Carson Beck, the quarterback at Georgia. When you have big shoes to fill, he's done that. And again, we all know how much Georgia is hated. And other than one person today on College Game Day did not pick them to win the national championship. Alec told me I didn't get a chance to watch it because I had a late night. I was at the movies last night and had a late night. But the other person picked Oregon. But, yeah, I mean, he's got the wheels to the car. The keys to the car, excuse me. He's got one of the top, quarterback jobs in the country, and it's Georgia. So look for Georgia again to be in the college football playoff, and I don't know if they'll win a national championship, but they'll probably be in the Final Four when it comes down to it.
Okay, my 3 players to watch. And I'm going to go the same way. I'm going to go reverse 3-1. Number 3 for me is the Ohio State offensive line. Because they did what Colorado did. They reshuffled their offensive line. They got Scott McLaughlin from Alabama. And Alabama fans were complaining to me, oh, Scott McLaughlin's going to be terrible. He doesn't know how to play center and snap the ball correctly. And then they got, Donovan Jackson's back, but they're going to have a couple new starters. I would be interested to see. I know Akron is horrible, but I would imagine they're going to try to pressure Will Howard and see if Ohio State's new look offensive line can hold up. So that's my number 3. Number 2, and this guy's last name might sound familiar because his brother at one point played for the Buccaneers. Miami of Ohio quarterback Brett Gabbert. He started last year, but got injured halfway through the year, and somehow Miami of Ohio, like I predicted in the preseason last year, somehow still won the MAC. And I think, of course, they're going to win it again this year. And I think he's going to be a big reason they win the MAC. And my number 1 player to watch in week 1, and I know we just saw we got a little taste of it today, is DJ Uiagalelei at Florida State. I want to see if he can prove all of his, I'm not going to say haters, I'm just going to say doubters. I want to see if he can prove all of his doubters wrong and show that he can be a really good college quarterback and actually be productive. And now we get to my coaches we think might get fired. And again, I'll let you go first.
I found the ones, Bud, that have, these are the odds. I went on and looked at the odds. But I'm not going to go down the whole list. We talked about Billy Napier. I think if the Gators get off to a slow start, if they don't, like I said, the first 5 games, if they don't win 3 of those, because that schedule at the end of the year is a nightmare. If they don't get to 6 wins, I think if they get to 5, he keeps his job. If they finish under 5, 4 or less, he gets fired. And again, he wasn't put under the greatest circumstances at Florida. And the Gators are, I'm not going to say years away from being competitive again, but they're far, far away from being the wheel in the state of Florida goes around with the big 3 with FSU, Florida, and Miami. Right now it's at FSU because they were supposed to be a college football playoff team last year and got outed there at the end by the committee. But right now the power is in FSU until otherwise proven. And even if they lost today, it doesn't mean that they're not going to win the ACC. They could still bounce back. And Mike Norvell's too good of a head coach, being that he was at Memphis and then he left Memphis to go to FSU. And, us Bulls fans were happy that he left Memphis because Memphis was the big one. The other 2 that I'm going to take is Sam Pittman. I think he's got the hottest seat of anyone in college football, even more than Billy Napier, because Arkansas is now, they're going to renew their rivalry with Texas, which I didn't even know there was a rivalry until I was told by a Longhorns fan that back in the day, Arkansas was a rival for them. I didn't know that, but they're a rival team.
Interesting. I didn't know that either.
Yeah, Alec, I'm good friends with 2 or 3 Longhorn fans, and they said when Texas is coming into the SEC, and I'm like, well, good. I said, you'll still have Oklahoma, and you'll get to mix it up with Georgia, Florida, Tennessee. He's like, well, what about Arkansas? And I'm like, what about Arkansas? They're like, that's a rival. I go, you guys had a rivalry with Arkansas? I did not know that. And I talked about him on Thursday, and I'm going to mention him again, and that's Mario Cristobal at Miami. If he has another season like Miami had last year, and I'm going to predict they're going to lose to USF in week 4 at Raymond James Stadium, he's going to get fired too. So those are my 3 as far as coaches getting fired.
Okay. I got 3, and it's 3 completely different ones. Number 3 for me is Mike New at Ball State.
Okay.
And we've seen their record the last 2 years. And I think if they have another bad year, I think he's going to be out the door and gone. Because they're in the MAC. And over recent years, I remember Ball State being somewhat decent in the MAC and being competitive. It just seems like the last 2 years, they have been a doormat. Everybody goes in to play them, and they whether it's Miami of Ohio, whether it's Toledo, whether it's Ohio, they go in there to play Ball State and say, oh, this is an easy game. We're going to put up 60. So Mike News, number 3. Number 2, and we talked about him on Thursday, Scott Satterfield, Cincinnati. I think if they, like Napier, if Cincinnati and Scott Satterfield, if they get off to a slow start this year, which I have them getting upset by Miami of Ohio, and I think it's week 3. It's either week 2 or week 3. I think they lose to Miami of Ohio again. And I think after that game, if they lose to Miami of Ohio for the second straight year, I think Satterfield gets told, here's your ticket. You're gone. Go find a new job somewhere. And then number 1, and this is the Big Ten. Nothing but love for Illinois, but I'm sorry. Brett Bielema should not be coaching at Illinois anymore. And I think if they get off to, like I mentioned about the other 2, if they get off to a slow start, I think Brett Bielema gets canned and they have to find a new coach. And then we're going to wrap up the show by giving our thoughts on the Florida State Georgia Tech game. And I see your face. I'll let you go first.
Well, like I said, I mentioned on Thursday that, and actually my show on Thursday night after I got up here with Alec, I have a show that was an hour after we got off the air at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I said on my show, I said, I'm going to take Georgia Tech, the points, and I think it was under. I think that it was like 50 points. I don't remember what the over under was for the game today. But I also said on the show on Thursday that I thought one of the teams that was going to take a step back was FSU because, yes, DJ is taking over. It's like, if you remember when Peyton Manning left the Colts and you had Andrew Luck coming in or someone taking over for Tom Brady, you have big shoes to fill. And in Tallahassee, because of what they did a year ago and what I know from, I have some friends that are Seminole fans. And again, I'm part of Seminole groups on Facebook. Why, I have no idea because I'm a Gators fan, but I like to get the insight on everyone else's thoughts on a lot of things. So, I had a friend of mine last year who reamed me out on the phone about them not making the college football playoff. And today you saw what happened. They took a step back today. Georgia Tech, again, like I mentioned the other day, they're like the mosquito that just will not go away. And I remember the first year I covered USF, they were playing us here at Raymond James Stadium. And they, back in the day, I think used to run the triple option offense. So the only team that I can aware of that so does that
with Jeff Sims.
Yeah, I think Army's the only one I think that still runs that offense. I could be wrong.
No, Navy does too.
Okay, Navy does. Okay, and they're both in the American because Army joined the American last year. So, and the Army Navy game won't be a conference game, by the way, in case everyone is wondering. The first year, it's not a conference game; it's still just the game that it always has been. I don't ever miss watching that game. But anyway, to get back on topic with the FSU game, I'm not surprised. And then again, they only put up 21 points. But again, guys, it's early. And I hate to say this, but FSU is going to find their way to get to the ACC. And when they play Clemson and they play Miami, and if they do this against those two teams, then you've got something to worry about. But right now, they had to go all the way to Ireland and play Georgia Tech. I'm happy that FSU lost, but again, at the end of the day, Georgia Tech was the better football team, and they deserved to win the game.
Okay, now I'll chime in with my thoughts. Everything you said was spot on. I agree. And Florida State just had I think it was the end of the first half. They had a play where it was like 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7. And they threw it, and they did a QB draw. Well, QB zone read, where the QB had the option of handing it off to the running back or running it, and he decided to run, and he got maybe 2 yards. And I was standing next to the bartender that I work with, and we both looked at each other. We're like, that was a stupid play. And Georgia Tech, I'm going to say this. Georgia Tech looks like they might be a serious sleeper/threat in the ACC. I know it's early, like you said, but I see some similarities to people were down in Boston College last year saying Boston College was going to be horrible. And they almost lost to Holy Cross. And what happened after the Holy Cross game? They put Thomas Castellanos in at quarterback, and they ended up winning a lot of games. Not saying that's going to happen with Haynes King at Georgia Tech, that he's going to get replaced. But I think this is a building block for Georgia Tech for the rest of the season. Now, they still got to play. I think they play Clemson. I know they play Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech, I've watched film from their spring game. Virginia Tech looks like the real deal. And they're my pick to win the ACC. Which I got some comments on when I did my ACC and I picked Virginia Tech to win. They're like, "What?" People are like, "What are you talking about?" It's going to be Florida State or Clemson. Clemson to me's fallen off, but that's something we can talk about a future episode. But I think that, and I usually do this at the end of the podcast, I give out my social, like my Twitter to people and tell them to go follow, because I post stuff on there from time to time. So if you haven't already, go follow my Twitter. It is CFBAP 2024. I will be posting stuff about the college football during college football season on there. And if Bradley, if you have a social media account you want people to go follow.
Yeah, I have a Twitter or X handle. You can follow me at Brad Walker 3083. I post all my articles get posted to that Twitter page. So if you want to go read, and again, guys, I'm not a professional writer. I get nitpicked that I sound like a freaking amateur. I am an amateur. I don't get paid to write, guys. I do it for a hobby and I enjoy it. I get credentials to USF and the Rays. So you can follow me on there. It's at Brad Walker 3083, and you can read my articles. And yeah, send me a message, send me a DM, and we'll have a conversation.
Same with me. Send me a DM and message, and we'll have a conversation. It could be about college football. It could be about why you think one of us is wrong with our bold predictions, or ranking conferences, or freshmen to watch, or coaches that are going to get fired, maybe. But for the Fourth and Long podcast, for Bradley and Alec, we are signing off. We will see y'all next week on Monday. Have a good one, Bradley.
You too, Alec. Thanks, man.
You're welcome.